Okay, we have two presentations. The first one is a class size overview for the board and the community. Each year, we share with you our district enrollment. We show you the breakdown, all sorts of things. As we contemplate whether or not to move to the Princeton plan or not, and looking at different peaks and valleys in terms of class size across our 3 elementary schools, we wanted to share that with you in a little more specificity tonight than what we typically share when we have this presentation that in its entirety will be next week. So Margaret and I will just walk you through some the current reality with some caveats. We'll talk about those in a minute, and what enrollment and staffing looks like next year. And then we'll also discuss the middle school staffing. So the first piece is we look at a trajectory of our student enrollment. And this is from October 1st of every year. So this is typically Beds Day. This is a basic reporting day where we send all of our student enrollment, our teacher information, staff information, demographic information to the state education department. So as the notation at the bottom shows, these are all of our students that basically are enrolled in our schools or private schools, as well as students with special needs that are out of district. So we basically have 2,300 students that are eligible for education. If you go back to 2013, we had just shy of 2,600. So we share this because our demographics are changing. Our student enrollment is down. If we move this chart further to the left and went back 10 years ago, we have experienced about a 10% enrollment decline in the last 10 years. And over the next couple slides, we'll show you where those impacts are. So I'll let Margaret take the next slides and I'll chime in. This is really our method of tracking student enrollment in all of the elementary schools, as well as the number of teachers that are assigned. And you'll see the formula in terms of average class size, so on and so forth. So the first one up is BV. This data is as of today. You see that that's time stamped up in the left corner. And I'll let Margaret talk about this chart, as well as some of the different colors and what they mean.
Muted. First thing you'll notice under the date stamped is that the numbers in pink are the projected kindergarten numbers for 21-22 for each school. Those numbers come to us from Infinite Campus. So it's the program telling us that we have students already in our schools with siblings who would be of age to come into kindergarten in the coming year. That's not necessarily the actual number, but it is the number we start from as a guesstimate. Sometimes things happen, a family moves, and that number becomes 36. Sometimes families move in that we haven't anticipated, and that number becomes 42. And kindergarten enrollment is always a funky thing. Very often, we have students showing up halfway through September. Oh, school is on, here I am. So that number can fluctuate greatly in either direction, but nonetheless, it's there for us as a planning tool. So that's the first thing. You see in the purple, the cap size, which is board policy for every grade level. And then you see 2 blue columns that represent what BV would actually have looked like if this were a normal non-COVID school year. That is the number of sections they would have had at every grade level and the corresponding number of students who would have been in person with us under a normal set of circumstances. That isn't what's currently happening because kids are remote. Some of BV's students are right now at Furnace Woods and Frank G because BV did not have space with social distancing, but we wanted to compare apples to apples. So we wanted to show you what it would look like if we were actually in a regular school year. The sections in yellow show you what next year is projected to look like. So you see the number of sections that they would have at each grade. In some cases, we go up a section. In some cases, we go down a section. You see the actual number of students as of today that we know are enrolled in the sections that will roll forward, first grade into second, second into third, and so on. Next to that in the white column, you see the number that is needed in order to split and create the next section. And you can see right now that there is a fairly healthy distance between that yellow column called enrollment and the white column of need to split. That's a good thing. On the far right is the average class size, and those are terrific numbers for BV. There isn't really a class that is close to the cap, close enough to make us worry at this moment. Again, this is a fluctuating document. Laura and I start this document every year at this time. The three administrators and their corresponding assistants update this regularly for us. It's a way for us to track both FTE in Laura's case and program and enrollment in my case. So this is BV's story, an average class size next year of 19.5. They drop slightly in student body from 301 to 292. We will maintain the section number at 15. I'm going to move on to Frank G. Okay, same basically layout for Frank G, so nothing to explain there. Again, we're comparing what they would have looked like were we in regular session this year in the blue to what we hope to look like in regular session next year in yellow. A slight decrease in their total number of students. We will maintain 20 sections. The average class size at Frank G is 20.3. They are close to their, where are we? You can see the caps on the right-hand side. So first grade is the only one here that I am, no, I'm sorry, third grade too, worried about in terms of, will those numbers hold? Will they decrease? We don't know that. But again, it's why Laura and I started this early. And every week when we have an update, we go in, we check it out, and we try to plan from there. Occasionally, it may mean a section goes down in enrollment and we can move a teacher. And perhaps that teacher goes to an area where the enrollment surprised us and increased, and we might want to reduce the section. So we have a 20.3 average for Frank G so far at this point in the year for planning. Take a look at Furnace Woods. Again, same layout, same pink projections. If you look at the bottom, they go up a section and their class size drops slightly. Right now, they have a projected enrollment of 43 in their kindergarten, which is fairly large for their past few years in K. If you look all the way on the right, you can see their average class sizes. I'm sure everybody looking at this is looking at grade 5 and saying, oh my, we left that at one section because that is the cap. And we need to have a little time expire before we have any conversation about that. The cap is 26 for grade 5. We would have, if this were not a COVID year, we would have had, if you can look on the left, the same situation in grade 4. And I think we can all remember that we did have this conversation about grade 4 at Furnace Woods last year. And the decision was made to leave it at one section, and that teacher was moved to Frank G and took the place of a retirement in that building at grade 4. Obviously, with COVID, we did not continue with that plan because we needed to reduce class size to make room for social distancing. So that same question rolls forward into 5th grade. And you can see right there, their average class size, 17.3. They remain the lowest class size in the district. So what's next? Let's stop here, right, and ask if there are
any questions around elementary before we move on to middle school?
Okay.
Okay.
On to middle school.
So this is in similar fashion. We tried to replicate the models Margaret just shared for middle school. So the top row is our current construction in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade with 2 teams per grade level. And currently have had everyone returned in a normal situation, as Margaret shared. Those are our average class sizes in the middle school, just under 19 and 6th, and 19 and 7, and 16 and 8. Rolling those students over, so bringing in the current 5th graders going to 6th grade next year, and 6th grade and 7th grade move up, you'll see the average class sizes there. Because we were looking at class sizes, and as we're contemplating, what potential budget reductions are out there that we need to explore, we worked with the principal, Mr. Owens, and said, what could happen in terms of the low enrollment? Would we be able to merge teams? Would we reduce a team? And so he and his counselors, and then ultimately Margaret and I got involved and said, if we were to reduce a team between 7th and 8th grade, and this is where things get a little tricky and convoluted. 7th grade and 8th grade teachers can teach 7th and 8th grade. A 6th grade teacher cannot teach 7th or 8th grade unless they have a very specific and particular certification. A 6th grade teacher can teach 5th grade, 4th grade, and going down to elementary, but it's very atypical that a 6th grade teacher can go up the ladder. So really, this is just some math and moving numbers around, because we have discussed what other potential reductions might we need to consider in order to drive down a tax levy, whether we pursue Princeton plan or whether we don't. So this would be reducing one team. What that means is that one team would teach a little bit of 7th grade and a little bit of 8th grade. All right. The kids would still be in a team. They would still move through their courses together. But the team of teachers would have basically a split schedule. Half of their classes would be teaching 7th grade and half of them would be teaching 8th grade. It's not uncommon for some middle schools to do that, especially to do that when they're experiencing an enrollment dip, in order to try to right size the staffing or make sure that average class sizes stay within a margin that the board and the community feel comfortable with. So what that would do is comparing the blue square, the top blue square, which would be status quo next year, versus what it would look like if we had a split team between 7th and 8th grade. You see the average class sizes. 6th grade remains the same because there wouldn't be any changes in 6th grade. But 7th and 8th grade would go up just about 3-ish kids in 7th grade and a little over 2 kids in 8th grade. So we have been having discussions around what other potential savings could be out there. Do we have the retirements that could, we could just assume those positions and not rehire? We don't for the entire middle school. And just to recall, a middle school team includes an English teacher, a science teacher, a math, and a social studies teacher. So if we were to reduce a team, just so everyone understands, a team would be those 4 teachers. We would reduce them and either we would not refill those positions if those individuals retired, or we would have to lay them off. The other caveat or important distinction here to share is that the way seniority works is by your function. So depending on your certification and what your assignment is in our district, you may be accruing seniority as an elementary teacher. You may be accruing seniority as a kindergarten through 12th grade teacher, or sometimes a 7th grade through 12th grade teacher. Most of our middle school and high school teachers that teach math, English, science, social studies, for the most part, are qualified to teach any grade level between 7 and 12. And the reason I share this is because if we were to move forward with reducing a team, it would be the least, and we did not have a retirement or a resignation, it would be the least senior staff member, right, grades 7 through 12, right, that teaches English, math, science, or social studies. So that person might work at the high school and not the middle school, but that's where you would refill the position. This was a conversation we had a few months ago talking about the Princeton plan, that the Princeton plan would reduce 14 positions. Most of them are K-5 positions, but other positions are K through 12. So In the Princeton plan, if you recall, we would reduce a music teacher. That would not necessarily mean an elementary music teacher. It would be the least senior music teacher in the district because their seniority is accrued from K to 12. All right, so that's a very important distinction that we wanted to articulate. This is, again, a little more breadth and depth from our typical class size report, just because we have a lot of other very similar debated items that we're talking about, particularly the Princeton plan, and as we've been discussing, declining enrollment and what impact that may have or could have on staffing. So we wanted to go an inch wide and a mile deep in terms of elementary and middle school. Some of you may be asking, well, what about high school? High school is a little different animal. And the reason is because the kids self-select what courses they would like. And that's a really, really good thing. It gives our high school kids ownership. There's a course catalog. They meet with their counselor. They pick what they enjoy and what they want to do. The issue is that choice and giving about 750 high school students choice in building their schedule is it takes a really, really long time. So the high school schedule really, in terms of getting all of that input fed into the system, we're still a number of weeks away, but we'll have a similar conversation with the high school after students get registered and after schedules are identified. For example, if students go to BOCES in the morning or afternoon, that will affect the schedule. Certainly, as Lisa mentioned, we're in CSE season, so different changes to IEPs will impact high school schedules, but that analysis is on the horizon. We're just not there yet because of the process of kids choosing their courses, and especially doing it remotely, it's taking a little bit longer.
And we will have similar questions with the high school, I'm sure, about class size. You know, do we want to run an elective if there are only 8 kids registered for it? Or do we want to say, we'll run it again next year and hopefully we'll have 16 kids in the second year? I'll say this, I know Joe's been saying it at certainly every meeting I've been at where this has come up. This is not the partner to the Princeton plan. This is a question of enrollment, which, as all of you know, is a conversation we have every year at elementary. We haven't had it at secondary, but we know that we have a declining enrollment, and we certainly have smaller and smaller class sizes. So at some point, it makes sense for us to say, do we need to right size our staffing? Is it appropriate to do so? But it isn't tied to the Princeton plan. And, you know, regardless of what the board's decision is about the Princeton plan, this is still a conversation that we should be having around middle school and eventually at the high school whenever they're ready, as Joe said. So there you have the numbers, again, trying to compare apples to apples for everyone so we can see what it looks like and what it could look like.
Does anybody have any questions? Alex?
So from a student's perspective, nothing's going to be different for our 7th or 8th grader. They might have a different teacher than they would have, and there might be a few more kids in their class. But from the student side, they won't know any different.
Nope.
Correct? The teachers will have an increased burden because they're going to have to be teaching 2 different levels, but
right.
Okay.
And honestly, and you know, I'm sure everybody's aware of this, but 7 to 12 teachers, our high school teachers, do not teach a grade level. They teach courses at many different grades. So it's not as though I'm a 9th grade ELA teacher and that's all I teach. I might teach a 9th grade class, I might teach an AP course, I might teach a 10th grade class as well. So, you know, that certification gives us as administrators a great deal of levity in terms of where we place you. The only caveat to that is science. Science is the only content area where the certification is course-based. So people have a chemistry cert or a biology cert. They can't teach out of that certification. We're very lucky in Hendrick Hudson that most, if not all, of our science teachers are multiple certifications. So we have a lot of movement available to us with folks. That's a good thing. And honestly, you know, Laura and I tell the teachers that every year, go and get more than one certification. Don't leave yourself stranded that if the district has to eliminate the only thing you're certified in, you don't have a job. So the more you bring to the table the better off you are and the more attractive you are as an employee, because I have some flexibility with how I can move you if I need to. So it's times like this where that becomes a really important conversation at all levels.
Okay, thank you. And my second question is, this would not affect our students that receive special ed services in the middle school at all, right?
Yeah, and thank you for mentioning that, because of course I had my own notes and asterisks. All of the students who receive special education, whether it's through the ABC program or they're in special class, self-contained classes, those students are taken out of this equation. So yes, to be super clear, this is not any program reduction or nothing. This really is having one team of middle school teachers that will teach a little bit of 7th grade and a little bit of 8th grade. And because of declining enrollment over time, that's why the increased class size is not that significant.
I'm gonna just add something real quick, if that's okay, because I just remembered, I spoke about this with John and Anicia. I also want everybody listening to know that there will still be AIS math. There is still AIS reading at the middle school. That is not, in this conversation. So we have a pretty good staff with that at that school. We've been pretty successful in those models, thankfully, over the past few years, and that will continue.
And it's hard to predict what the COVID landscape will look like in the fall, but potentially we might need these staff members if we still have to have, no, I guess no, because we'll still have hybrid teaching, or we don't know. We just don't know, right? Would COVID impact this decision?
Correct. Yeah. We have, if we're reading the tea leaves, we're seeing a very, slow crawl toward reopening or back to normal. But we do believe as districts are preparing for reducing 6 feet of social distancing and having a lot of barriers, that probably will be a method of how we'll open up next fall. Now that's just a probably statement. We meet every Monday. I know I've said it ad nauseum. We meet every Monday with the county executive and his team, and he reports what he's hearing from Albany that he can share. And sometimes he hears about things the same time we do. So we have no insider knowledge, but just as staff, especially education staff, have been a priority to be vaccinated, we sort of see this loosening of the 6 feet and trying to get more kids into the building. So that's what I would anticipate, but we have no knowledge.
Lisa, did you have a question?
I was just wondering if there was the potential with this plan with this idea of reducing a team for a student to have the same teacher in 7th grade and in 8th grade, like for their English class, if they were on that team that was split between the two, that could happen, right?
It could. So what the model has right now are 2 teams in 7th and 2 teams in 8th. And what we wrote down is we'd have a team and a half in each. So yes, if I was a 7th grader right now, there is the potential that my teachers could teach me 8th grade next year, or there's a potential that the same group of teachers, would teach 7th graders next year and then 8th graders the following year. Correct.
So again, similar to the high school, where I know some kids probably look to have the same teacher again. So it wouldn't surprise me if they say, I'll take that class. And that's a great thing. So it likely could be.
Lori, did you have a question?
So it's up to us, because I know a lot of people are worried right this second. They just heard this for the first time and everybody's very worried. And some teachers, I would imagine, are extremely worried about what's going to happen, right? So if we go through with this, there's going to be teachers who are no longer employed, correct? Right?
In the absence of retirements or resignations, correct.
So it is our job to actually look at stuff like this. So I'm sure the community is grateful that we're looking at stuff like this, because we're in a little bit of a, with everything going on. But at the same time, it stinks, to tell you the truth, right? Because there is a huge difference between somebody who's been teaching 7th grade math for, I don't know, and that's probably, it's not the person that would go first, but, and somebody who teaches, like I have 7 through 12 certification, but I've been teaching AP Calc for 30 years. So I wouldn't be the one who would go, but if we had an AP Calc teacher, it's hard to put a 7th grade teacher in the place of an AP Calc teacher. And that could possibly happen. Probably not, but that could possibly, something like that could happen, right? So that's a little bit scary, where maybe the person best for the job might not be getting that job if we have to move around based on seniority type of things. So it's just an opinion. It's something that, you know, we got to be honest that it might happen, I guess. So this is a 50-50 kind of thing, where it's our responsibility to look at the money part of this and to do what's right and enrollment. And at the same time, realistically, who's going to be teaching what when 4 teachers have to kind of move? Just an observation, but. it's gonna be
Yeah,
hard.
you know, we've said in all of our our Princeton Plan meetings over the last couple of weeks, you know, people have said, well, what else? You know, Princeton Plan should be the last resort. What else can we cut? What else can we reduce? And I tell a little story. The story is, look on our roofs. We have solar panels, right? We put solar panels on our roofs to lower our cost to pay for power, and we've saved millions over years. Frank G. Lindsay has parking lot lights with little windmills and solar panels so that we could be more efficient. We have tightened the belt with transportation schedules. This board asked us to reduce across the line. I think it ended up being about a 5% cut to everything last year to try to get our tax increase down to under 6%. For 7 years in a row, and I have to say this, for 7 years in a row, our average tax increase in our district was 1.04%. Meanwhile, our expenses are going up at least 2%, at least cost of living. The revenue we brought in from taxes did not match our expenses. Why? Because of the strength of the Indian Point pilot, and because we have been tightening the belt for years. And we're getting to a point, which is why, you know, the Princeton Plan has surprised some people, but has really gotten the attention of many, is when you eat up all the crumbs, you're out of crumbs. You have to look at systems and structures and things that typically we would not normally talk about. Someone asked me yesterday if you know, why didn't we consider the Princeton Plan 5 years ago? And I said, because 5 years ago, we didn't have 2 really big things happen. We didn't have significant decline in enrollment, and we did not have 30% of our budget going out the door with Indian Point. And that the sands have shifted under our feet, which means we have to look at things and programs or services or you name it, that you know, we typically haven't had to look at. And class size is one of them. And how we deliver instruction at the middle school will not be impacted. There will just be a few more kids in each class. And Lori's right. This is a year where, you know, as of today, we have the fewest number of staff, teachers, I'll say, committed to retirement than in the last 7 years. Now that could change. That could change with what the rest of the year looks like, or next fall, because that certainly happened last year. You know, a lot of staff who could, they could say, okay, I was going to retire later, but I'm going to retire now because this is madness. That may happen again, but we shouldn't count on it, which means staff reductions would be, as Lori mentioned, it's the least veteran, the least senior people, because those are the laws and regulations, not my rule, not your rule, not the school district's rule. That's a state rule. And that's when the decisions become more difficult. It's a difficult decision, period, but they become more difficult and a little more emotional to make, because, you know, these are, they're teachers and we care deeply for them, and we've welcomed them to our community, and asking people to leave is never a fun task. But, you know, the financial situation is what it is, and you know, the community is asking us, what else is there? What else is there? And we've been saying pretty consistently, we're running out of some options until we talk about big structural changes, and this could be one of them.
You know,
Right.
Oh.
I was going to say, we're talking about staff reductions and savings. I'm assuming we're going to be putting numbers on this at some point next
dollar.
week. Yes,
yeah,
dollars.
yeah,
I'm
we c-
sorry, not
yeah,
teacher
we
numbers,
can-
dollars.
We can put dollars on it. I'll let Enrique chime in on the math he uses because there are a couple different calculations in terms of a teacher who typically retires. We have an average calculation versus what a teacher would be who would be reduced in force or laid off. But yeah, we can have that number for next week.
Alex?
One more question. Have we forecasted out our current, I guess, K-4 students so that we know what our middle school students are going to be like in the future? So we're not looking to hire back in 2 years after we just laid staff off now.
Yeah, and in fact, if you look at the data we provided, we could forecast that out. I could do some quick math, but we'll add it up and we'll show you what the trajectory will look like when we come back next week.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Margaret, did you want to say something else? I kind of cut you off with the dollars question.
That's okay. I was going to touch on what Lori brought up in terms of a teacher needing to move and teach another course. And I understand that and I appreciate it. I have to think, though, that if someone's moving from the middle school, let's say, and bumping a high school teacher, which means the high school acquires someone who is currently teaching middle school, we have an uber talented high school staff. And I know that Jim and Anthony and Nick would never put a brand newbie in an AP class unless they were really 100%, 1,000% sure that they could be successful. So their movement as they absorb a new staff member, if that is what happens, I gotta believe that they're right on top of that and probably already thinking about what their options are, because this conversation has been happening internally. So everybody's aware of, we keep saying, please pay attention, because this is a 712 cert, a K6 cert, a K12 cert. And, as Joe said, literally where the position is being cut is not necessarily the staff member that's being cut. So I think everybody's aware who they are, if they're potentially in that line of fire, if you will, and are actively engaging in whatever they need to do so that their next moves are as successful as possible. But I totally understand the difference between being in the middle schools. It's a different mentality to be a middle school teacher. I'm not saying that it's Blue Mountain or Hendrick Hudson High School. Everyone knows everywhere that middle school teachers take on a very special assignment. And there's a difference. There's a difference moving, even as a 6th grade teacher, you're elementary certified. There's a huge difference teaching in a middle school as a 6th teacher versus teaching at an elementary school. So we'll see. We are. It's the most painful part of all of these conversations for all of us. We do not take this lightly. It's hard for us to let go of people, and some of us are actively working with those who are already looking, trying to protect themselves. And we'll do everything we can to make sure everybody lands on their feet.
Lori, do you have something else?
I know what people are thinking and saying, because I'm getting some texts. They're saying, I hate to ask this, is there anywhere else? Like they're going to say, are there any administrative positions that can be cut? I personally don't think so, to tell you the truth. But are there anything else like that? That's what I'm getting asked right now, just to let you know.
Yeah, before I answer that, let me go back to a question Alex asked, because I was able to do some quick math. Alex, there will not be a cohort coming from currently enrolled elementary students into the middle school that's any higher than an existing cohort in the middle school. So I think sort of what you were asking is, are we anticipating, if we make a decision to reduce staff, are we anticipating any big bubble that we then will need to rehire staff to address class size? And as of today's current numbers, now again, in some of these grade levels, we're forecasting 4 and 5 years, but if today's numbers hold true, none of the grade levels, cohort grade levels coming in would exceed the number of students in grade level right now. And we're anticipating some very wide-ranging cohort sizes, as low as 120 and as high as almost 170. Currently, the middle school has about 160 sixth graders, 180 seventh graders, and currently 152 eighth graders. Lori, in terms of your question, that's a discussion, for the board to have. What we did is we took enrollment, we looked at number of sections and, did some very basic math. I think it's very, I think it's a normal conversation for any employment group to feel that they are under siege in terms of a budget discussion. What we can't deny is that our district demographics are significantly different today than they were, as I showed, 2013, and I've got data going back to 2011. We're a much smaller district. The students we have are more diverse today than they were 10 years ago. And what we're sharing are some, basic law of averages.
I agree.
We're anticipating class sizes at the middle school that are still lower than many class sizes at the elementary school. So that we certainly can sharpen our pencil and have the discussion. I mean, our assistant principals, we have 2 administrators in the middle school of over 500 kids. We have 3 administrators at the high school that will top out at around 780. We have made administrative reductions over the last, I know in the last 7-8 years. We can look and we can talk, but a lot of those positions are not really contingent or part of a mathematical formula in terms of class size, and the reality is we have fewer kids. Will the impact of Indian Point change that? More families moving in? We'll sort of know it when we see it. Usually every 5 years we do a demographic study to look at how many non-school age children are in our district from basically newborns to age 4, so we can project. The issue is we really need the housing market to settle down a little bit because it's so active. By the time we have a report done, that usually takes 6-8 weeks to complete. Given the activity in the housing market, we would have bad data, and we certainly don't want to make any long-range financial commitments regarding live births or number of kids who are 4 years of age or less, with the housing market and the turnover that we have, or the potential.
All right, so I just want to do a quick summary. So we are not looking at this as a purely monetary savings. We have a decreased population in our middle school, and we're trying to right size the middle school. This is not going to reduce any special education services, any current services that the students have in that building. And this is completely separate issue from the Princeton plan. And we will get numbers next week for what 4 teachers will save us. Not that that really is the primary issue here. It's more of, do we need extra teachers? And the other thing we have to look at is coming back from COVID next year. Do we need a little bit of a cushion and have that extra team just for extra support with kids catching up and stuff like that? So I think I captured it. Yes.
Yep, that's a great summary.
Okay, thanks.